Hello, good afternoon. I'd like to do a video on the life and the calling of Abraham, the patriarch to the three major religious faiths, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Uh, I'd like to start off acknowledging that it's going to be from chapters 12 to 25, from his calling to his death. But I just want to touch on chapter 11 and 10 just to make a quick point. Um, Most people claim their genealogy, like a lot of Black Hebrew Israelites, a lot of Hebrew Israelites, Jews, um, Muslims through Ishmael, uh, through Esau, the children of Jacob, the children of Abraham. And so they claim to be Semitic people. Like you hear the expression anti-Semite. It comes from Shem, the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Uh, so anti-Semite is against the people of Shem. So in Genesis 11, it says that Abraham came from Terach. He was his father, and he came from Ur of the Chaldees, Kasdim in Hebrew, in Genesis 10, verse 28. But even like, for example, the blacks that claim to be descendants of Abraham, well, in Genesis 10:6, it says that Cush fathered Nimrod. The sons of Ham was Cush, Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. Cush is Ethiopia, I think all the way down to Sudan. Uh, Put, which is Libya, and Canaan, which is the Lebanese Palestinians. I mean, it seems like people were spread out from all over the place. But, you know, those who like to claim the genealogy of Abraham do so, even though Abraham just came from Shem and a lot of other peoples came from Ham and Japheth as well. I'm not going to get into the genealogies of everyone, but I just want to mention that the Cushites, which is the black people, the Ethiopians and stuff, they apparently came from Ham, according to Genesis 10:6. But a lot of blacks claim that they descendants of Abraham. I'm not disputing it. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying from the text that I'm reading, it appears as though blacks came from Ham. And a lot of the reasons why it's rejected is because the slave masters used the curse that Noah pronounced on Ham's child, Canaan, for, you know, curse be Canaan, and they used that to justify the transatlantic slave trade, and we know that's wrong, that was horrible. And so, you know, that's why the slave masters associate black people with descendants of Ham and try to put a curse on us for slavery. So anyway, another point I want to note before I start is that in Genesis chapter 11, it says that Terach fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran was the father of Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew. This is verse 28. But also, the thing to note is that Abraham lived to be 175 years. Now, to me, that's very surprising because just prior to that, a few generations before, um, Adam lived to be 920 years. Methuselah, the oldest recorded man in the Bible, 969 years. So it kind of amazes me that the life expectancy of human beings dropped so dramatically from 900 years to 175 years. I know Moses, I think in Deuteronomy 34:7, he lived to be 120 years. Who else? In Psalm 90:10, it says basically the life expectancy would be 3 squares and a half, so which is 70 years. And if by reason of your strength you make it to 80, it's like be thankful for that. Everything else is overtime. So basically, even the expectations had been very much lowered based on the life expectancy. So that was pretty interesting that I found. I think Sarah lived to be, Terah, the father, lived to be 205 years as well. So just from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11, the life expectancy dropped. Now, I'm not getting into why that's the case and curse of the earth and all of that, based on the eating from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, the whole theology behind it. But I'm just noting that there was a dramatic drop in the lifespan in just 10 chapters, the first 10 chapters. So, all right, let's officially start. Genesis 12. So God said to Abraham, Yahweh, Adonai, however you want to refer to God, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go to the land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, but I will also curse those who curse you. And by you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So that was part of Abraham's ministry, if you will. His calling is that if you bless Abraham, you will be blessed by God. And if you curse Abraham, like Balak and Balaam, Balak wanted Balaam to curse the children of Israel and so forth, God is going to curse you for cursing Abraham. So Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran, and he took Sarai. At that time, it's Sarah, but her name was Sarai at the time, which means mockery. I'm going to get into her name change. So he took Sarai, his wife, which his brother's son Lot, and they set out for the land of Canaan. So when God appeared to Abraham in verse 7, chapter 12 still. Oh, by the way, keep in mind, this is the chapter that I think Ted Cruz was having a debate with, what's the guy's name? They just had a debate not too long ago, and he was asking Ted Cruz, when Ted Cruz quoted that scripture about blessing those who bless you, he said, where in the Bible did you get it from? And Ted Cruz kind of stumbled a little bit, didn't have it off the top of his head, but it starts at Genesis chapter 12. And so that's where it started. Tucker Carlson was his name. Tucker Carlson was the other guy, right? So continuing along, when God appeared to Abraham, Abraham built an altar and made sacrifice to God. So I'm going to get into Exodus 6:3, when God said, by my name, Yod-He Vav-He, I did not appear to Abraham by name, but by my title, El Shaddai. That's how I appeared to him. So Abraham knew God by the title El Shaddai, God Almighty. Exodus 6:3 indicates that. So when they say he sacrificed, built an altar to God in Bethel, he was calling on the name El Shaddai. Now there was a famine, so God told him to go down to Egypt. A lot of people went to Egypt. Abraham went to Egypt. Moses, I think, went to Egypt. The 12 tribes went to Egypt and met Joseph there, who was there from prior. with the whole incident with they sold him to the Ishmaelites into slavery. Jesus went to Egypt, escaping from Herod when he was trying to kill the 2-year-olds. A lot of people escaped to Egypt during the Bible. So he said when he gets to Egypt, they're gonna pretty much see Sarai, Sarah, his wife. I'm gonna recall her Sarah, even though until Genesis 17 her name was Sarai, but I'm gonna forget. So for the sake of consistency, I'm just gonna refer to her as Sarah. So, and also Abraham was Abram until Genesis 17. We'll get to that when his name was changed also. But for the sake of generically using their names, I'm just going to refer to them as Abraham and Sarah, okay? So he said, my wife Sarah, she's very beautiful. The Egyptians are going to want her for himself. So just say you're my sister, because if I say you're my wife, they're going to kill me to take you. Kind of like what King David did with Uriah the Hittite and Bathsheba. So even though she was his half sister, the sister from his father's side, not from his mother, but she was still his half sister. So he wasn't technically lying, but he was leaving out the little details because that they were married because he was trying to protect himself. Now, keep in mind that Cain also got one of his sisters to be his wife. This was before Mount Sinai when the Torah prohibited marrying a close kin or any type of intimate relations with a close kin. All right. So continuing along, the two promises that were made was for descendancy and land inheritance, right? So when they did get to Egypt, Pharaoh saw her, and excuse me, she was very beautiful. She's like, oh, she's my sister. Okay, so then I can take her then, So, but at least they didn't kill Abraham, And when Sarah tried to have her, and then God intervened and gave some kind of plagues and stuff to Pharaoh's house. And Pharaoh said, wait a minute, it's because I took Sarah. That's why these things are happening. Remember when Jonah was on the boat and the shippers knew something was up with Jonah, why the seas were so rough all of a sudden? Well, Pharaoh knew something was going on in his house and something wasn't right. And then because of the plagues, and then he said, why didn't you tell me this? God, this is your wife, she's not just your sister. You caused all these plagues, and so he released her. I don't think Pharaoh did anything with her intimately, but just my thought. So anyway, so Abraham left from Egypt after the famine, went back to Bethel, and he built an altar and called on the name of Yahweh, Jehovah, Yehovah. So different variations as to how people would interpret it, translating into English. But again, keep in mind, according to Exodus 6:3, it appears that the name that Abraham was given was the title El Shaddai. It wasn't his name that he was calling on, even though the scripture says it calls on his name. So again, in chapter 13, all the promises being repeated again after he built an altar and honored God. He said, I'm going to make you as numerous as the specks of the dust of the earth. I will have your descendants. So, hold on one second. So I just wanted to double check my notes. So going on to chapter 14 now, we're going to get to the first recorded civil war of the Bible. This was a battle between 5 kings versus 4 kings, and the 4 kings won. One of the kings was Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Amorah, same as Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. They had rebelled against Shadola Omer, the king of Elam, who was king over all of them and titled king of Goyim. Goyim means the foreigners. So there was a battle between those kings. They divided. There was a civil war, and the four kings beat the five kings. Right. So in because of that, in addition to that, the victorious kings, they captured Lot, Abraham's nephew, and so Abraham went to rescue Lot, and he ended up defeating the kings that had been victorious. So when he came back to from the slaughter of Chadola Omer and the kings that were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him also. And in addition, Melchizedek, who is the Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, Melchizedek means Malchi, king, Zedek, righteous, the righteous king, the king of righteousness. He went out with bread and wine to meet Abraham, and he was the priest of Ha Elyon, God Most High. Prior to that, Abraham knew God as El Shaddai, but Melchizedek knew God as Ha Elyon. So Abraham gave him a tenth of everything, and that's where the concept of the tithes started. And by the way, it was a tenth of the spoils of the war, the battle, all the things that were recovered when the four kings had defeated the five kings. There were two civil wars in the Bible, just for reference point. One is in the book of Judges, I think chapter 18, when the tribe of Benjamin was battling the other 10 tribes. The Levites were on both sides. But that was another civil war in the Bible, but this was the first civil war in Genesis chapter 14. There's the king of Sodom said to Abraham, just give me the men that you rescued, from my kingdom and keep the goods for yourself. Abraham said, no, thank you. You keep the goods. I don't want it to be said that the king of Sodom, Bera, made me rich by me keeping his goods. So I'm giving everything to you. Everything that I recovered, I'm giving it to you. So keep in mind, that was an interaction between the king Bera from Sodom and Abraham. So when we get further on, I'm going to discuss it in chapter 18, why Abraham believed that there must be righteous people in Sodom, because of the fact that the king was being very apparently righteous by saying, keep the goods for yourself, just give me back my men. So that's when Abraham was bothering with God about, if there's any righteous in Sodom. But this is where he first met the king of Sodom. So this is where it all started at, emanated from. So chapter 15, verse 1, again, the word of Yahweh came to Abraham in a vision. I think also in Jesus, in John 8:58, when Jesus said, Abraham longed to see my day and he rejoiced in it. And they said, you're not even 50 years old. What do you mean Abraham saw you? But I believe, this is just my personal opinion, that Abraham was given visions of the Messiah, as it says in 15:1, that the word of God appeared to him in a vision. Also in, I think 17, 18, I'm going to get to a few other places where the word of God appeared to Abraham in a vision, 18:1 as well too. So when God gave Abraham the reassurance that he's going to bless him with children, before then, Abraham had a little concern because he said Eliezer, his servant from Damascus, he's going to inherit all my possessions because I don't have any children to leave it with. You know, so God says, no, you're going to have an heir. You know, it's not going to be Eliezer of Damascus that's going to inherit your estate, right? It's going to be a child from your own body. Look up to the sky and count the stars if you can. Your descendants will be that many. He believed in Yah, and he credited to him as righteousness. Now, this is a scripture that is very much taken out of context by a gentleman named Paul in Romans chapter 4, and also a couple other places. He says that when he was trying to say that salvation is by faith alone, and gave Abraham as his example, that Abraham believed God and he counted that towards him as righteousness. He's saying that God counted Abraham's faith as righteousness, but that's not what the scripture says. The scripture says that Abraham counted God's promise as righteousness. Because it says he counted it to him as righteousness. So they twisted who was the he and who was the him. Paul said he was God and counted it to him, Abraham, as righteousness, but the scripture actually says he is Abraham and he counted it to him, God, as righteousness. And that's in Romans 4:3, chapter 4, verse 3, verse 18 and verse 22, or also Galatians 3:6, he repeated it. But in James chapter 2, verse 23, James also cites the same scripture, but James puts it in a proper context where it's not about faith, it's about obedience. And so James acknowledges also that Abraham counted, God's promise as righteousness, right? So that's something, I did a video on it, Romans chapter 4, the faith of Abraham, is that the righteousness or was it his obedience? And so you can also look at that video as well on my channel. Okay, so again, he repeats it to him, I'll give you the land as promises. These are promises that are coming from God. So when he was in a deep sleep, again, the vision that verse 1 says God appeared to Abraham. He told Abraham, your descendants will be slaves, held in oppression for 400 years, but I will also judge the nation that oppresses you, and so forth. So basically he's saying, I'm going to punish the people that are oppressing you. So they made a covenant, and I will give you the land to your descendants, and from the valley of Egypt to the Euphrates, the territory of the Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Girgashites, Jebusites, Kenizzites, Kadamites, a lot of ites. I'm going to give you all of their land. And I think the land was accomplished during Joshua. He's the one who actually accomplished it, but it was starting through Abraham's promise. So when he gets back, he says he had an Egyptian slave girl servant named Hagar. And so Sarah said to him, take Hagar, because Sarah was 90 years old, and procreate with her, so it'll be counted to me. If you had a servant and your servant had a child, then it was considered part of your genealogy, if you will, by adoption. But that's how it was, the customs. That's why even in the transatlantic slave trade, if a slave has children, the children belong to the master. So it was a generational curse, if you will, or generational custom, whatever word you want to use. I'm not, judging the righteousness or the unrighteousness of it, or whether I think it's right or not, or wrong, but that was the customs at the time. So basically, Sarah gave Hagar to procreate so that Hagar can fulfill the promise and it would be counted unto her. There was the Nazarite uh, covenant, if you will, where if a brother dies and if he doesn't have children, the next brother takes seed and with his wife, his widowed wife, and then it's counted onto the brother that died and so forth. There was a lot of adoption going on in the genealogy reckoning. But one of the problem was that, and I'll get to it a little bit more, was that God never specified at the time that his blessing of descendancy would be through Sarah specifically. Only after there was an incident with Sarah and Hagar and so forth, then God specified to Abraham that no, the promise is going to be through Sarah, not anyone else. And so I'm not, faulting God or anything, but I'm just saying that's probably why Abraham didn't realize that the promise would be fulfilled through Sarah specifically, because it was never mentioned in the Bible until later on, and we'll get to that. So in the meantime, with their human understanding, God told Sarah told Abraham to have Hagar and to procreate with her. And of course, Abraham, I don't think he hesitated too much. Most men wouldn't. I mean, if that's what I have to do, I got to do what I got to do. So anyway, he procreated with Hagar. I'm not justifying that or polygamy or anything like that. I'm just acknowledging that that's, probably how it went down. But anyway, when Hagar got pregnant, she started kind of showing off now, like, I'm the one that, having the baby and I'm the fortunate, blessed one, So, Sarah took a little bit of offense to it, a lot of offense to it. And so they said Hagar was showing a little contempt towards Sarah. Can you imagine the servant now is like, hey, I might be the servant, but I'm the baby mama, you know what I mean? So, it's kind of showing off a little bit, if you will, in my own words. So, Abraham said, what are you going to do? What am I going to do about it? Listen, I'm just, being obedient to what you say. You told me to take her and procreate. God told me that I was going to have children. I'm just following orders, So, basically, Abraham said, let God decide what is right, I or you, Sarah said that. So Abraham said to Sarah, listen, she's in your hands, you're my wife, do what you think is appropriate. I'm not condoning her behavior, we spoke to her, but, I can't, what do you want us to do? You want us to fire her, So Sarah said, no, it's okay. We're not going to fire her. But Sarah started treating her real harsh, hey, go do the dishes, no time out. And, she was treating her rough now, because, Hagar was, showing contempt because she was pregnant and Sarah wanted to put her back in her place, So anyway, Sarah was treating Hagar so harsh that Hagar ran away. She couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take this job anymore. It's too much, So the angel met Hagar. The angel found her by a spring and said, go back to your mistress and, and submit to her authority. Don't worry, I will greatly also, this is chapter 16, verse 10. I will also greatly increase your descendants, and there will be so many that it would be impossible to count them. So basically, Hagar got the same descendancy blessing that Abraham got, that there would be so many descendants of Hagar as well. She didn't get the land inheritance promise, but we'll get to her promises later, but she got the descendancy promise. So, and of course, we know that through Ishmael, the son that was born to her, there's a great nation, and there were 12 princes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Ishmael also. So, but basically, the angel is telling Hagar, listen, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to have your descendants too. You're going to be a matriarch as well. So Hagar went back and submitted to Sarah. So she called his name, the angel told him, you are to call his name Ishmael, which means God pays attention. God is paying attention to your situation too as well, so don't worry about it. So she named the place the God El Roi, the God of seeing. So that's what she was referring to God. She called God El Roi. That was the title she gave to God, because she said, have I really seen the one who sees me and stayed alive? But basically, it didn't really say that she saw God. It said that she saw an angel spoke to her. But, the presence of an angel is like the authority of God, the presence of God, So the same thing with Jacob, when he wrestled with an angel, he said, oh, I saw God and lived. I'm going to die, and Jethro, Jephthah, in Judges, I think chapter 11, 12, when the angel went up in the flames, he said, oh, I've seen God, I'm going to die. So of course, people equated the presence of the angel as seeing God itself. So going on to chapter 17 now, we're going to get to, by the way, Abraham was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. So 13 years later, Abraham was 99 years old, again, when Yahweh appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. By the way, let me turn to Exodus 3:6, because I've referenced it a couple times, so I just want to put it on record. I'm sorry, Exodus 6:3, excuse me. God spoke to Moses, and this is what he was telling Moses. He said to him, I am Yahweh, the Lord in English. I appeared to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, although I did not make myself known to them by my name, Yud-He-Vav-He, Jehovah, Yahweh, Yehovah. So it's saying that he appeared to him as El Shaddai, which is what I said earlier, and it's being repeated again. That was the title that he appeared to. It wasn't until Moses that he revealed his full name, if you will. So Abraham fell on his face, and this is my covenant that they established. And God said, your name will no longer be Avram, which means exalted father, but your name will be Abraham, father of many. So that's when Abraham name was changed, because he'll be a father of many nations. Again, the promise repeated. Kings will descend from you also. So I will establish my covenant with you and with your descendants, and after you, generation after generation, as an everlasting covenant. The word everlasting means the circumcision covenant will be forever. Oh, by the way, I call it circumcision, but the next verse, it's going to highlight that was the sign of the covenant in Genesis 17. Berit Milah, which is the covenant of circumcision. So That's when the circumcision covenant was established. Of course, we know there's several covenants in the Bible: the Edenic covenant or the Adamic covenant. Um, there was the covenant that you know Adam would be the master or ruler of the earth, and he would be the caretaker of all the animals and the land and everything. And of course, that was all broken uh, when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then there was the Noahide covenant, where also called the Rainbow Covenant, when God promises not to flood the earth with a flood, whether it's a local flood or earthly flood, a universal flood. That's also debated, but basically God said he wouldn't flood the earth, even though we still do get flood-like symptoms like hurricanes and tsunamis and things like that. Um, so I guess that wasn't what God was referring to, but sometimes we do feel like we're still getting flood-like symptoms. But nevertheless, also, there's the Mosaic covenant given at Mount Sinai, the Davidic covenant, when God established a covenant with David and said, if your son keeps on keeping the Torah and stays righteous, then, you'll never lose a man to sit on your throne, and it will be established. It'll be a perpetual, eternal covenant. But just because a covenant was eternal, that doesn't mean it's not conditional, if you will, right? Like, for example, this covenant with Abraham was an everlasting covenant that would last forever, but Abraham still has to do his part by keeping the circumcision of himself, his household, and his generations have to keep the circumcision as well. Remember when Moses almost didn't circumcise his two sons? His wife Zipporah said, "What a bloody husband you are to me," in Exodus chapter 4, that she had to circumcise his sons. I don't know why Moses neglected to circumcise his sons, but this was very important to keep that covenant. In the New Testament, in Acts 15, there was a debate about whether Gentiles needed to be circumcised to be part of the covenant of established through Abraham, from Abraham through Moses. The decision was that based on the Torah, it's correct. The Gentiles only have to be circumcised if they want to partake in worship at the temple, or if they want to have a Passover meal with a Jewish family, children of Israel family. Those were the two conditions that Gentiles were required to be circumcised. Otherwise, they didn't have to. But, basically, the covenant with Abraham, circumcision, was everlasting. So, because in verse 14, it says, anyone who breaks my covenant will be cut off from being my people. And that's when Sarah, its name was changed from Sarai to Sarah. Sarah means mockery, and Sarah means princess. She was 90 years old when she gave birth, and when her name was changed. I'm sorry, she was 10 years younger than Abraham. So basically, that's a long time to live a life with a name mockery. That's just my personal, observation. Don't mean anything by it. But so that's why I'm just saying, parents, you got to be careful what you name your children. Give them blessing names. That's all I'm saying. I'm not mocking Sarai. I'm just saying, just give your children blessing names. All right, just my suggestion. All right, not going off track. Is relevant to her name, but you see, God changed her name. I think also Jacob changed to Israel, and his name Jacob, had a little negative meaning, but Israel had a more positive meaning, the power of God. So, what did Jacob mean? I think it was the supplanter, the guy who hangs on to the other person's coattail. But anyway, that's besides the point. Just give your kids good names. So the As for Ishmael, he says, I've heard you, I've blessed him too. You know, he's not going to be neglected. Uh, but I will make 12 princes, and he will be a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Yitzhak, Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. So you see, now God is telling Abraham that the covenant, the promise of the descendancy will be fulfilled through Sarah. He didn't specify that before. And so that's why Sarah said, use my handmaid, since Sarah was barren at the time. I don't know if God made her barren or why she was barren, but basically she was barren until God, moved in her, in order for her to procreate. There were other people that was barren. I think Michal, the wife of King David, she was made barren because she mocked David when he was dancing half naked with his linen ephod vest and bringing the ark back into Jerusalem. And he was, carrying on, celebrating, fantastic, feeling, giddy. And she was like, oh, look at that. My husband, the king, looking like a common man. And because of that, God made her barren. I think Samuel, mother, was barren also. And God opened her womb. I think God opened the womb of Mary, the mother of Yeshua, Jesus. But that's a different story. I don't want to get into that. But, as far as barren women, the text does say that she was barren. I don't know why. But anyway, so God moved on her. The Holy Spirit, God moved on her in order for her to procreate. Hannah, that was her name in, I think, Samuel's mother. So anyway, I will make my covenant with Isaac, right? Whom Sarah will bear. Now remember, again, I don't mean to mention it, but you know what? It's mentioned in the New Testament, so I have to address it. It's relevant that Paul said the covenant that God made was with Hagar. And Hagar is the covenant and Sarah is the slave woman. He completely reversed it. I'm not getting into Paul's teachings and, so forth, but a lot of times he just twisted the Tanakh right there, blatantly. I mean, people either ignore it, exegese it, apologetics it, whatever you want to call it. They try to, doctrine it. And they accept it, even though it's a blatant misrepresentation of the truth. So anyway, the covenant was established with Abraham through Sarah. So Abraham was 99 years old when he circumcised his son Ishmael and himself. And Ishmael was 13 at the time. And everyone else in his household, both free men, slaves, family, everybody got circumcised, all the males, So it wasn't at 8 days old that Moses said to do it in the future, but they did it, at the time they were told to do it. So going on to chapter 18. So again, Yahweh appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. 3 men appeared to him. Now, this is a Trinitarian proof text favorite chapter that, they like to believe that this was a theophany, Old Testament appearance of God in appearing as a human being. A Christophany, they even like to say this was the appearance of Yeshua, Jesus, as well. I'm not getting into the theophanies and Christophanies and Trinities and all of that. I'm just saying that this chapter is their favorite. It's a darling to Christians who try to promote the Trinity. So anyway, but it's not the context of what I'm talking about, the calling of Abraham. So Abraham prostrated himself on the ground and said, my Lord, which is Adon, which is a human Lord. It wasn't Adonai, which is the name of the translated name of God that the rabbis use. Um, the lowercase L and the uppercase L. The lowercase L was like the human lord, like the lord in England. There's a title they give to royalty. Your landlord have the type of lord. Anyone who has a human being who has the type of lord, the Hebrew calls it Adon. But when it's the uppercase L, that means it was the name of God that was used, but the translators don't use the name of God. They don't translate the name of God. They translated Lord. Jews translated Adonai as well. In Greek, they use the same word for both the name of God and for the human lords, Kurios, Kurios. And so therefore there's a lot of confusion as to who they're referring to. So you have to read the context to see if it should be an uppercase L or a lowercase L referring to God or a human being that's called Lord. All right. So Abraham prostrated himself, by the way, to the three men, right? And we know the Hebrew word for worship is shachar, and you're not supposed to shachar anyone as God. You're not supposed to worship anyone as God. Again, there are instances where, for example, Yeshua, Jesus was worshipped, they knelt down, but you have to understand there's a different context to worship. You can worship means to honor someone like Joseph, when he was second to Pharaoh. You know, the prophecy of his other brothers worshiped him when they came back to Egypt. And even in Revelation 12, the sun-clothed woman and the sun and the moon and the stars fell down to worship. I think Haman in the book of Esther, you know, he said, bow the knee whenever I pass, bow the knee, you know. So, you know, Sarah worshiped Abraham, you know, called him her Lord. You know, so there is a context to Shachar, Hebrew worship, but it's not worshiping someone as God. It's simply giving the glory that the king deserves or the royal person deserves or the honor that they deserve. So it doesn't mean that if the Bible says, you know, a human being was worshipped, that they were worshiping that means that person was God. They were worshiping them as God. So how many time? Okay, just watching the time. So so Abraham washed their feet. You know, Jesus taught that pattern of washing your, you know, brother's feet. That was an honorable thing to do. That was like a form of worship, washing their feet when they came from, you know, walking out in the land, in the desert and stuff. So they brought him milk and a calf. Sarah prepared it and so forth. And he said, now they said to him, where's your wife Sarah? And he said, she's in the tent. And then he said, I will certainly return to you around this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Again, repeating the promise. A little bit of lack of specificity by saying they said to him this, and then he said to him that. So remember, there were three men. Haggai, I think later on, a prophet referred to them as angels, but you know, the plain reading Peshat text of the Bereshit, Genesis, says three men. Okay, so whether the angels in the appearance of men, whether it was two angels and God who appeared as man, I'm not getting into, like I said, theophanies, but because later on you'll see two men go down to Sodom, and one stayed and discoursed with Abraham. And so that's when they say, oh, well, it was three, you know, spiritual beings, but two were angels and one was God. And that's the theory that modern day Christianity interprets this text, this chapter to mean. So anyway, so when he said Sarah will have a child, Sarah laughed to herself, thinking, I am old, and so is my Lord. She called him Lord Abraham, Adon. So God said to Abraham, "Is anything too hard for me to do? I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son." Uh, so Sarah tried to deny laughing, like I didn't laugh, but he said, "Yes, you did laugh," but he was calling her out, but she felt a little embarrassed, I guess, having laughed at the promise. But I'm a little bit surprised because it wasn't the first time they were promised. They went through the whole incident with Hagar, and so I guess in her understanding, she didn't really understand completely uh, that the promise would be fulfilled through her. So because of her age. So anyway, so basically, I will give orders to her, and she will have children, and to his household, and after him, to keep the way of Yahweh, to keep and do what is right and just, so that Yahweh will bring about to Abraham what he has promised. So you see, going back to chapter 15, excuse me, that Abraham, that says Abraham was promised based on his faith alone? No. In chapter 18, verse 19, it says, God will, if he does what is right and just, then I will bring about for Abraham what he is promised. So it wasn't unconditional. It was conditional upon his obedience. So it wasn't just faith alone, just believe God, and that's your imputed righteousness that we can propagate onto the Christian church and whatnot, just have faith. No, it was because it was obedience. Just like he told Solomon, you will have your throne established forever if you are obedient. He said to David, your son Solomon, I will continue your throne if your son is obedient. And we know Solomon wasn't obedient. So all the promises were conditional. It wasn't just faith alone, and it wasn't unconditional. All right? And we're going to see other places where it was because of Abraham's obedience, not his faith, why the promises were fulfilled. Even though they may have been made before he did what he was supposed to do, but consequently, he did what he was supposed to do. So basically, so God said to Abraham, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great that I will now go down and see their deeds and what warrants the outcry that has reached my ears, that have reached me. So if not, I will know. That's a peculiar text, because does God have to go down to Sodom and Gomorrah to see what's going on? The same thing he said back in Genesis 11 with Nimrod. He said, let us go down and see what Nimrod is up to. Let us go down to confound their language. You can go back to even in the garden when God says to Adam, Adam, what is it that you have done? God is omniscient. He can sit up on the throne in heaven and know everything that's going on earth. But you know what? Nothing wrong. There's no contradiction or anything if he wants to make a first-hand witness appearance, right? With, see it with my own eyes, basically, So I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just that it was a little surprising, when people might object and say, well, look, God has to go down to Sodom to see. Hey, he chooses to do that. So what? So this way, there's no way, you can't say he didn't show up, right? And, and the two angels also tried to, plead to the men directly to Sodom to behave themselves, So it was a first-hand witnessing, just like Noah when he was building the ark. So it says, the men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before Yahweh. Now, was Yahweh one of the three men? Because it said two men came down, two angels came down to Sodom. So was Yahweh the third person that was there, or was he there before in addition to the third person? There's rabbinical debate about that. I'm not taking a side, a position either way. So this is where God tells Abraham Sodom is bad, real bad. Just like Nineveh was going to be destroyed if they didn't repent, right? So Sodom is going to be destroyed. So Abraham starts bothering with God. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. You're not a God to sweep up the wheat and the tares together. Why are you going to kill the righteous? Suppose there's 50 righteous, in Sodom. Are you going to kill the whole city and take the 50 righteous with you? And so God said, you know what? All right, fine. You can discuss with God. He's like an understanding father. He's reasonable. He's fair. He said, if there's 50, I won't destroy it. Abraham started thinking twice. He was like, well, what if there's 45? 40, 30, 20, 10. Got down to 10. God said, listen, if there's 10 righteous, I won't destroy it. So it ended up being destroyed, so there obviously wasn't 10 righteous. But I wondered, later on, when God tells Abraham in chapter 22 that to sacrifice his son Isaac, why didn't Abraham, say, listen, God, why you want me to sacrifice Isaac? Why Abraham was so concerned about Sodom, but not his own son, right? And I think it has to do with Genesis 14, going back when Abraham met Bera, the king of Sodom, and the king of Sodom told him that keep the goods for yourself that you rescued when you rescued Lot, but just give me back my men, my people, my citizens. And Abraham, said, no, you keep everything. I don't want anything. And so Abraham probably, this is my understanding, Abraham probably thought of, Sodom had righteous people, because obviously the king appeared righteous, and it would be very unusual for the king to be righteous and the whole nation to be unrighteous, because usually an unrighteous nation would overthrow a righteous king and put in an unrighteous king, that would go along with, what they want. Like when, the people were rebelling and they told Aaron to make golden calves, and Aaron said, the people made me do it, So I'm just surprised. I believe that that's why Abraham felt Sodom had righteous people in it, because of his encounter in Genesis 14 with Bera, the king of Sodom, that appeared to be a righteous king, right? So, and of course, Bera and Melchizedek were there together. And so, the priest of God was there, proclaiming the name of God. So that's why probably Abraham associated Bera with being a righteous king. And so therefore, he thought Sodom would be righteous. But again, there weren't even 10 righteous. So going on to chapter 19, the two angels went towards Sodom, and Lot saw them. He was standing in the gate, and he also prostrated himself before to the ground when he saw them. I mean, he knew they were, someone of honor or loyalty or, authority, if you will. And so he prostrated before the two angels. Remember, John in Revelation was prostrating before an angel, and the angel said, no, don't prostrate before me. And then he did it again a second time. He prostrated before an angel, and So sometimes, we associate, like I said, angels with the presence of God, and, it might starstruck us, if you will. And we're not necessarily worshiping the angel, but we're just honoring them. But, there's a fine line. So I'm not saying Abraham crossed it. I'm just acknowledging that he prostrated before the two angels. So Lot said, "Come over to my house, stay at my house. What are you doing out here?" So Lot took him into the house, and then the men of the city of Sodom said, came with their, I can just picture it, with their torches and pitchforks, and be like, bring us the men, bring the men that came, those two pretty looking boys that just came, fresh meat, anyway, I'm being a little dramatical, if you will. But basically they wanted to have sex. I was trying to say it in a different word, but they wanted to have sex, sodomy with the two men. One thing that happened that I'm sorry, maybe I say a prayer about it or something, but I don't understand, is that Lot said to them, I have two daughters who are virgins. Let me bring them out to you. You can do with them whatever seems good to you, but don't do anything to these men since they are guests of my house. I appreciate him standing up for his guests, the two angels, of course, absolutely. But to offer his daughters, I'm not gonna comment on it, but I don't, I'm not feeling that. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling that. All right, why would he want to offer his daughters? Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say on that, because I don't want to say too much. I don't want to sound negative or anything like that, but that really kind of like bothers me that he offered his daughters. Okay. So anyway, so he says, this guy came to live here, referring to Lot. That's what they were saying to Lot. You a guest in our city, and now you judging us? You telling us we can't have the men that came? Who are you? You're a guest. And so they were threatening to break down the door and bum rush the house, like a drug bust or something, just knock the door down and, snatch up the inhabitants. And the angels who could protect themselves, they struck the men at the door with blindness, and so they couldn't see left from right, they couldn't see what they were doing anymore. Just like God um, confounded Nimrod and his people when they were trying to build a tower with confusing languages, so that they don't be able to accomplish their mission with communication and unity. Well, the angels blinded the men also. So, so the angel says, "Listen, let's go. Let's get out of here. Who you got in your house? Save them. Bring them with us." And so Lot said, "I have my daughters," which I mentioned again, and the son-in-laws. He went out to the city to the husbands. So the husbands had married them, but they probably was in the betrothal. Am I saying it properly? Phase. Don't beat me up. Betrothal stage. They were engaged, or there was the custom. You get engaged, you go take care of your home, build a home, and then you take her out of the father's house and take her into your home. So apparently they weren't living in Lot's house. The daughters were still there, but they were married, right? And they were still virgins. That's why Lot said, you can have my daughters. And if they were married, that's even more reasons why did Lot offer them up. I'm not going back to that. I want to move on from that, but I basically didn't understand why he did that. But they were married, and so he told the angels, "I have my daughters in the house, and so and their husbands. Let's all get out of Sodom." But
the men didn't take, the husbands, the fiancés didn't take Lot seriously. They like, ha ha ha, yeah, right. They're gonna be destroyed. Yeah, whatever. So they stayed behind. Just like Noah's Ark, when Noah was preaching the gospel to the city, and people weren't taking him seriously until they felt that raindrop. So, but even Noah himself was dallying. He was dragging his feet. Oh, I gotta find my shirt. Gotta pack my bags. I gotta do this. I gotta, check my, this and that. And the angel said, no. They grabbed him by the hand and said, let's go now. Let's go. So, we can't destroy the place until you're out. So you're holding us up. You know what I mean? So stop procrastinating. They dragged him and took him. Noah, his two daughters, I'm sorry, Lot and his two daughters, and Lot's wife. And they said, don't turn around, don't look back, and so forth. And we know Lot's wife looked back. I don't know why. I speculate why. Did she have an affinity for Sodom? Did she love Sodom and she was reminiscing and she wanted to see it one last time? Uh, was it for a positive reason or a negative reason? Did she wanted to see the destruction with her own eyeballs? Like God said, let's go down and see with our own eyes what's going on. But whatever the reasons were, positive or negative, she was told not to look back, and she turned into a pillar of salt, right? As a result. So Lot ended up being, without a wife, unfortunately. Um, Again, it has to do with obedience. Remember Adam and Eve, obedience in the garden. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Be obedient. It's not faith alone and all of that. It's obedience, right? I'm just making a point. So Lot said, I can't make it all the way to the hills. There's a little city, Zoar. Let me just go over there, to escape real quick. And the angel said, go ahead, go ahead. So then Yahweh caused sulfur and fire to rain down, brimstone and fire to rain down on Sodom and Gomorrah, right? The twin cities. So Lot stayed in a cave, he and his two daughters. And the daughters said, our father is old, she's, we got to procreate, so they plied him with some wine. When he was drunk, he fell asleep. One went in, slept with him, got herself pregnant, and the next night the other one did the same thing, so they had to do that to procreate, because they felt like, the world was destroyed, it was only just Sodom and Gomorrah, but from their vantage point, they thought the whole world was destroyed and they were going to repopulate like Noah, right? So people like to mock and say, oh, the daughter had sex with the father, da, 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 da. But, the context says they were repopulating the earth. They felt they were needed to repopulate the earth, just like from Adam and Eve, and also the repopulation with Noah. Be fruitful and multiply. So the two sons that they have were called Moab and Ammon, Ammons, the Ammonites, the Jordanians, basically. So going on to chapter 20, let me take a quick break at chapter 19. So chapter 20 of Genesis. So Abraham now, back to Abraham, he continued on to Gerar. And when he went to the land of Gerar, he said to his wife Sarah again what he did when he went to Egypt before with Pharaoh and Pharaoh's men. He said to Sarah, say you're my sister, because you're so beautiful, they're gonna kill me and take you. So to spare my life, just say you're my sister, okay? If anyone asks, So, of course, someone did ask.
Abimelech, king of Gerar, she came, and he came, excuse me, and he took Sarah. He's like, man, that's a beautiful sister. I'm gonna make her my wife. So God appeared to Abimelech in a dream and said, bad things are gonna happen. If you sleep with Sarah. You know, so Abimelech realized that that must be Abraham's wife, because that wasn't his sister. And God was about to punish Abimelech if he had touched her, if he knew her. So um, Abimelech sent back Abraham. It's nothing, it's pretty interesting when God appears to you, and says to you, don't do that. I wish God would appear to us all the time like that. But then sometimes we don't listen. But anyway, not to get off track. So Abimelech said to Abraham, why you lied to me? Why you lied and said she was your sister? You almost got me in trouble, with God. God was about to, take me out, for touching your wife, So he said, my heart is pure and my hands are innocent because I took her to be my wife, concubine, whatever I took her. I took her innocently. I didn't, like steal her from you. So basically he's saying, I was innocent. It was done ignorantly, if you will. But anyway, go, 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 go. You can't stay here, man. You causing God to come down on me, So at least he had a fear of God. I'll give him that much credit. But Abraham said, she's actually is my sister technically. She's the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and so she became my wife. So at the time it was before the Torah, when God prohibited, in Leviticus 18, I believe, you're not supposed to mess with your sister or, cousins and things like that. And, this is before. I know there's a biological explanation for it, the genetic makeup, have to be a certain generations, third generation cousin. After that, it's okay, and no immediate bloodline. Otherwise, there's some kind of corruption in the blood, if you intermingle close gene mixing. I can't explain it. Anyone in the medical field could probably know what I'm talking about and explain it better than me. But please free to write it in the comments, But there was a reason why at the time, before God ordained it, that mankind was able to procreate with their direct siblings. So anyway, so Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his slave girls so that they could have children. You see that? He made the whole family and town of Abimelech barren because of, him taking that one woman, So there definitely was gonna come down some bad things to Abimelech. But Abraham prayed to him and he was restored. So Genesis 21, the birth of Isaac. And so when Abraham, circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God ordered him to do, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzhak, which means laughter. Sarah named him Laughter because of all that laughing she was doing with all the promises that God was making to her that she would have a son. But it wasn't like she was mocking him. She said that God, whoever hears about it will laugh with me, not laugh at me. Chapter 21, verse 6. And so she named him Laughter in a fun way, if you will. The name Yitzhak means laughter, right?
Sarai meant mockery, Sarah meant princess. Avram meant exalted father. Abraham meant father of many nations. Yitzhak meant laughter. So Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, who was born to Hagar and Abraham, and he was making fun of Isaac, Yitzhak. So Sarah snapped again the second time. First time it was Hagar, kind of showing off on Sarah, being the baby mama. Now it was the children now. Apparently, if Hagar didn't, I don't know what she said to Ishmael, but, she apparently didn't prevent him from mocking his younger stepbrother. So anyway, she said, I will not have this slave girl son as your heir along with my son, Yitzhak, Isaac. So Abraham, of course, loved his son, that's his seed. So he was distressed over it. So basically he said, God said to him, don't be distressed. It's your son Isaac that will be counted in the promise. I will make a nation, again, the same thing the angel told to Hagar, of your servant Hagar, since he's also a descendant from you. But, unfortunately, Hagar's got to go. This is going to be a problem, and it's going to be a fuss, so, for all the men that love polygamy, hey, this is what's going to happen, right? Rivalry. So anyway, basically, he said, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of her, but she has to leave the house, right? So Abraham gave her, a jug of water and some bread and so forth. And it sounds kind of, like, what is that? Child support, water and bread, but, God told him that he got Hagar, he'll take care of her, which he did, so it's understandable, forgiven, if you will, but understandable. So Hagar had to leave. So she wandered into the desert of Beersheba. And when her water was running out, she started getting frustrated. And she said, we're going to die. She left the child under a bush and she walked a distance away, maybe a football field, because she said, you know what? I can't bear to watch my son die. I couldn't take it. I can't take it. So she walked away, crying and sobbing and stuff because of the predicament that she was in. And so again, right on time, Yahweh Yireh, she called him. The place was called. The angel of God appeared to Hagar and said, I will make him a great nation. Don't worry about it. I got you. And open your spiritual eyes. And she saw a well with water not far away. Now, this is definitely something spiritual because, I don't know if the well was always there or if the angel, created the well for her or whatever the case is. I don't know. But all I know is that, there's times when God opens your eyes and you see a whole army there to protect you, and God opens your eyes, Balaam, and you see, an angel standing with the sword, and that's why the horse, was stopping, but you couldn't see it, so there was a lot of spiritual stuff going on, and so when the angel opened her eyes, she saw a well, and she was able to get water and nourish the child and so forth. And even God, the angel said, I'll even find a wife for your son, Ishmael, from the land of Egypt. So angel,
Ishmael continued, because Hagar was from Egypt herself, right? And so, the angel went back into her kinsfolks in order to find a wife for her son. So, so back in Beersheba, Abimelech made a covenant with Abraham. He's like, God is with you. It's obvious God is with you. He was gonna, do some bad things to me because of you. Obviously, God is with you. Just like Nebuchadnezzar said to Daniel, your God is, the God, that he's the real deal, not what we've been worshiping, these pagan gods, So Abraham called on the name of God, the everlasting God, because God has established an everlasting covenant with him. So Abraham lived in the land of the Philistines as a foreigner. So in chapter 22, so God tested Abraham. God tempted Abraham. The scripture says God tempted Abraham. The word is nachah, Nachah, nakah. And translators, they're uncomfortable, especially the modern translators, the New Testament translators. They're uncomfortable saying God tempted Abraham because James in the book of James, chapter 123, says God does not tempt any man. Each man is drawn away, by his own lust, by his own sin, by his own the will, if you will. So they don't like to say God tempted Abraham. They like to say God tested Abraham. I'm not debating the word tempt versus test. So, I'll leave it at that. So God said to him, he called him, he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, who you love, Isaac. A couple things I want to comment on. First of all, technically, Isaac was not his only son. Isaac was his youngest son. Ishmael was his son, older son. I understand the promises made with Isaac. So if you say, take your son, your promised son, I could understand that would be a little bit more grammatically correct. But, he said your only son. So it's just a question mark as to if that is 100% accurate, because he wasn't his only son. If you want to say the only son of promise, yes, of course. But that wasn't what the text said. It just said your only son. And it said it twice. But moving on, and offer him as a burnt offering. Okay. I have a little problem with that, me personally, because all throughout the Bible, I could be a Monday morning quarterback, but all throughout the Bible, it says human sacrifice is an abomination. Leviticus 18, verse 21, Deuteronomy, 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, Psalms, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all throughout the text, human sacrifice is an abomination. So I've had questions about why God would even ask Abraham to sacrifice his son, even though he stopped him and prevented him and so forth. But it just seems as though that is something that is questionable. It's an abomination. Now, I wondered why Abraham never said to God, far be it from a righteous God to ask me to human sacrifice my son, like he did with Sodom in chapter 18. And so the only thought that came to mind is that in Sodom, he knew the king Bera, the king of Sodom, so he assumed that there had to be righteous people. But I just question why Abraham never, asked God, why would you want me to do this abomination, Because sometimes we have to
if we're told to do stuff, now Abraham knew God, but if we're told to do stuff and it doesn't line up with God's nature, then we have to question, are we really hearing from God? I don't have any doubt that Abraham knew God. Of course, from chapter 11, 12, God making promises, appeared to him in visions, the three men by the plains of Mamre, that God bartered with Abraham, or Abraham bartered with God. God appeared to Abraham in visions. So obviously he knew God, but I don't understand why God would ask Abraham to sacrifice his son, even to test, to test his faithfulness or loyalty, but it's just my personal opinion. Forget I said anything, it's just a thought, all right? Because, Jews, when they're discussing with me or debating with me, and Hebrew Israelites and others, they say, when Jesus says, eat the bread and drink the blood, that's vampirism and that's cannibalism. Why are we doing something, even if it's symbolic, that has a negative connotation to it? That's an abomination, actually. So why are we doing emblems of things that are abomination? And also, I mentioned before when God told the children of Israel to look upon the serpent, for healing when they were bitten by snakes out in the wilderness, the serpent on the pole, that the label on modern medicine, that they actually turned that into idolatry later on. So things that appear to be wrong, why is God tempting or testing Abraham to do something that's wrong? And personally, Abraham is a stronger, faithful person than me because I don't know. I would probably say to God, listen, like Moses said, take me instead, punish me instead, instead of an innocent son. There is a law in the Torah. If your son is rebellious, and he's constantly rebellious and he's beating the mother up and he's cursing them out and he's, not obeying and, really rebellious, really, really bad. You can take him to the elders and, they will try to talk to him, intervene. It takes a whole village to raise a child. And, if he doesn't, he's a bad sperm, a bad seed, and so, there is a punishment for that son. I'm not getting into it, but there is a punishment for a bad son, capital punishment. But Isaac never did anything wrong. So why is he being, used as a pawn? Anyway, I don't want to, speculate too much, but I'm not going to deny, certain things I have a little problem with, I hope, that I could be as faithful as Abraham, but, I just can't understand that. Okay. So please, when you're commenting, share your opinion. I want to learn too, because I don't know everything, obviously. So I want to learn too, And by the way, when you comment, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, share, so other people can share their feedback as well too. All right. So basically, Abraham went off with his son and two men, his servants, along with Isaac, and they took a third day to go up to Mount Moriah. And excuse me, 1 second. Yeah, by the way, so Abraham took 3 days to go up from Beersheba to Mount Moriah, which I checked on the GPS map. It's technically 22 hours if you straight walk it. But so the reason I mention it is because people like to say, well, 3 days, Isaac's sacrifice, they see it as a remez, Hebrew hint pointing towards Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection, and 3 days and 3 nights and so forth. But
I don't necessarily see all of that in the text, but I'm just pointing it out that people look at it that way. So 3 days journey, I think it was like 50 miles, 22 hours. I mean, if you're breaking it up, 15 miles a day, that would seem reasonable. Remember, they got to carry the wood and so forth, and also the fire, the donkeys. They got to carry water for them. So I see it as just simply breaking it up, a 3 day journey. Just like the children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years. Meanwhile, the trip from Goshen in Egypt to the land that they inherited is probably, I don't know, a 2-3 day trip. I remember checking it on the GPS too, but it ended up taking them 40 years. So anyway, that's all. So when they got there, uh, Abraham said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey. I'm going up, with my son to make the sacrifice." I don't know. It's just my opinion, my feelings that Abraham didn't want his servants to see what he was going to do, to Isaac, obviously to me. But there's a gentleman that, again, Paul, I think in Hebrews, he said in his faith chapter, Abraham by faith knew that God was going to resurrect Isaac, and stuff like that. There's nothing in the text that suggests Abraham knew anything about Isaac was going to be resurrected. He just made that up, to endorse his faith alone, teachings. Because nowhere did it say Abraham believed it, so he just made it up. Anyway, getting back to their story, he laid the wood on Isaac to go up. So Isaac said to Abraham, "My father," so innocent and sincere. Almost breaks my heart to tell this story too, just like the one with Lot and his daughters. He said, "My father." That's like saying, "Dad, where's the lamb that we're supposed to be sacrificing?" And Abraham said, "My son, God is going to provide a lamb." Now, I'm being honest with you. There's nothing to suggest Abraham knew God was going to provide a lamb, because Abraham knew his intentions was to, which he did do, to sacrifice his son. He didn't think he was going to be sacrificing a lamb. I can imagine telling your son, his son, that you're going to be the sacrifice. That would be very, very traumatic. So he didn't want to traumatize him. So he kind of told him a little, non-truth, if you will. Forgive me for saying it, but I'm just trying to be honest with the text, the literal understanding of the text. If someone wants to spiritualize it, that's more than fine. Please be my guest. Share a spiritual meaning all you want. But the literal meaning of the text was that Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, period. And that was the test, right? So to say that he wasn't mean that he failed the test. He would have failed the test. So anyway, so he's basically, straw manning his son. God is going to provide a lamb. So he bound Isaac, tied him up, and laid him on the altar. So obviously, he had intentions of doing what he was doing. And then Abraham put out his hand, took his knife to kill his son. Genesis 22, verse 10. He was going to kill his son. He wasn't expecting that to sacrifice a lamb. Otherwise, he would not have put his son on the altar and,
with the wood and everything and the fire and all of that, right? So I don't think he lit the fire yet. I think after you killed his son, then he would light the fire. I hate even talking about this. I'm not gonna lie, but anyway, I have to, right? It's in Genesis. So anyway, when he pulled out his hand, and the dagger in order to slay his son and sacrifice him, then the angel of Yahweh called out to him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Had to call him twice to really stop him, right? Like the first time you might have said, somebody called my name, and the second time was like, yeah, someone called my name. So he called his name twice to really stop him. He was just about to do what he was about to do. And so the angel said, don't lay your hand on the boy. Don't do anything to him. For now I know that you are a man who fears God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Remember in verse 2, again, he said, take your son, your only son. Well, again, Isaac was not his only son, but, the one with promise. So basically, again, it was not his only son, but it's referring him to his son. That was just a point I'm making again, that it wasn't his only son. Remember, Ishmael was born prior. So that's when Abraham called the place Yahweh Yireh, or Jehovah Jireh in English. Yahweh will see to it, or Yahweh provides, right? Because God provided a ram in its place. So God did give him a ram. There was no knowledge that Abraham knew that was going to happen. We could assume and speculate, spiritualize, but the text doesn't say that. Abraham was going to do what he was going to do. That's why the angel had to call his name twice in order to stop him, to get his attention. So anyway, but and again, another thing, sometimes it says the angel calls out to him, and sometimes it says God says to him. So which is it? Is it God speaking to Abraham? Is it the angel speaking to Abraham on behalf of God? You just have to make that little distinction and clarification. So it's just something that, kind of you have to consider. Sometimes it says angel, sometimes it says God itself, right? So we know God is not an angel. That's where people have a lot of doctrines they build around that, and they say, they it was a Christophany, if you will, right? So anyway, I have sworn by myself. This is the text that kind of conflates the angel of God and God, right? I'll read it to you. Genesis 22:15. The angel of Yahweh called Abraham a second time out of heaven. He said, I have sworn by myself, says Yahweh, that because you have done this, because you haven't withheld your son, your only son, I will most certainly bless you, and I will make your descendants as the stars in the sky, or the grains of sand on the seashore. And all the nations of the earth will be blessed because you have obeyed my order. So you see the promise made in Genesis 12, excuse me. The promises repeated in Genesis 15 when it says Abraham believed God and he counted him as righteous. No, Abraham was counting God's promise as righteous, because it wasn't the faith alone that made Abraham righteous. It was because Abraham was willing to be obedient to God and to obey his order. Also, we'll see in chapter 25 and 26 that it was because of the obedience why the promise was fulfilled. It was made before he was obedient, but it was conditional. He still had to be obedient, so it wasn't just faith alone, right? So after that, Abraham settled in Beersheba, where he was with Abimelech previously. So that's a tough chapter, right? The binding of Isaac, it's called. All right, let's continue. All right. So Sarah lived to be 127 years old, and then she died. Abraham got up, bowed before the prince of where he bought the tomb for Sarah. What's his name? I was looking for his name. Anyway, because it was a big deal, I think for 400 pieces of shekels, he said, listen, you are a man of God over here, you know, take any tomb you want. And Abraham said, no, I'm paying for it. And I think Stephen in Acts chapter 7 mentioned that Abraham bought it for 400 shekels, and there's other places that mention how much he paid for it. And there was a little discrepancy about how much he paid for it and so forth. That's not really important. But the fact is, he paid for it. It was the sons of Het, H-E-T, that he bought it from, right? So he buried Sarah in the cave. And also later on, when he died, he was buried, I think, next to Sarah also. So this is pretty interesting. Chapter 24, it says, Abraham was old and advanced in years. And so Abraham said to his servant, you know, hey, I'm old now, you know, go find a wife for my son Isaac, and get her from the land of my kinsmen, from my people. Don't take her from here in Beersheba. Go back to, you know, my hometown, if you will, and find a wife. So don't worry about it. The angel will go ahead of you, you know, to make your journey a success. So the servants of Abraham went back to the land where Abraham was from, and they found Rebecca, the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. So that's 24:15. I'm just mentioning that basically Rebecca was Isaac's cousin, right? Genesis 24:15, right? His brother Nahor's wife had a daughter, and you know, first cousins, second cousins, I don't know, but I'll have to double check. But anyway, she was beautiful. She was a virgin, never had sexual relationships with a man. And by the way, I just want to mention on the word virgin, they use the word Bethula, which means a virgin woman, and they specified never had sexual relations with a man. The reason I mention it is because Isaiah 7:14 uses the word Alma, and Alma means young woman. It doesn't necessarily mean a virgin, but it was translated Parthenos in the Greek. It wasn't the Septuagint, because the Septuagint was just the Torah, but the books of the prophets was translated later also, and it was translated as Parthenos, Isaiah 7:14, which means virgin, but the original word wasn't virgin, it was young woman. But here it specifies the word Bethula. So there is a distinction when she's a virgin, as opposed to a young woman who may or may not be a virgin, which is Alma, right? Bethula is virgin, Alma is just a young woman, right? So anyway, so Abraham's servant said, you know, if I meet a woman, you know, at the well, if she draws water for my me to drink, but if she also draws water for my camel, she's a keeper, right? She's a good woman. a really good woman who cares about my animals too, right? So um, when he met Rebecca, she said exactly that to him. Yes, I'll draw water for you at our well, but I'll also give you camel water too. He's like, that's the one. Um, so anyway, he took out a gold nose ring, two gold bracelets, uh, and he said, he bowed his head and prostrated before Yahweh, and he said, "Blessed be Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, because he has led me to find a wife for Isaac." So she went back home. She had a brother Laban, uh, and she told him about it. So the servant of Abraham met up with Laban, and he spoke to him and said, "Listen, my master is wealthy, um, and he's looking for a son." This is verse 35, 24, 30, 35. He's looking, Genesis, he's looking for a son for his wife. So based on the characteristics of, your sister, you know, would you accept her being um, my master's son's wife? Um, he mentioned that his master was wealthy. I mean, I don't think most women would say no in those Bible days to a wealthy man giving her a gold nose ring and two gold bracelets. That's more than giving her a calf as a dowry to the family, right? So I wouldn't call it flaunting his master's wealth, but he was simply not, hiding his wealth either. So they definitely said, sure, absolutely, why not? So he gave him flocks and herds, silver, gold, male and female, servants, camels, donkeys. That's a big dowry, a wide bride price, right? Um, so basically, they said yes. Rebecca, you want to be his wife? Sure, why not? We'll offer her to you, we hit lotto. Just kidding. But they said, well, let us just have her for 10 more days, let us stay with us, and let us say our long goodbyes. And the servants was like, no, sorry, we got to get back. So it's either yes or no. She's leaving with us tomorrow, yes or no. And they said, it's Rebecca, it's up to you. What do you want to do? And she said, I'm gonna go and meet and marry his son, his master's son. you know. I mean, a wealthy master, I think that's an offer most people couldn't refuse. So anyway, so when they went back with Rebecca and she saw Isaac, he came out to meet, Abraham's servant, and you know, he met Rebecca, saw how beautiful he was, and he just didn't hesitate to take her to be his wife. And they said that comforted him on the death of his mother, Sarah. So, going on to chapter 25, there's something I want to mention that's really funny, okay? Don't think I don't enjoy the Bible too. There's a couple sad stories about, Lot and his daughters and Abraham sacrificing Isaac, um, attempting or, to sacrifice Isaac. But there's one funny part that I want to share. In chapter 21, verse 1, it says, this is, Abraham was old and advanced in years. And so therefore he said, you know what, let me make sure my son starts fulfilling the promise. He got to get married. And so now, because I'm old now, let me go, find a wife for my son. But in 25, chapter verse 1, what does it say? After being old in verse 20, in chapter 24, verse 1, now it says, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. I thought he was old. I thought he was old. And she bore him Zimram, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Yishbak, and Shuach, 5 sons. He was just old a minute ago, and now he's remarried. I mean, he's entitled to remarry, but he was still strong enough to procreate 5 more children. Um, so I found that, by the way, he was 140 years old when he took Keturah to wife, right? And he lived till 175. So, he had 35 years with his second wife. Well, technically, Hagar was called his wife. Um, Sarah was his main wife, real wife, true wife, wife of promise. But Keturah was his third wife, if you will, right? After he was a widow. But I just found it funny that they said he was old in 24-1, and then in 25-1, he remarried and had 5 children now, But, more power to him. So, but he did give everything he owned to Isaac, and he gave grants to his 5 children with Keturah, and he sent them off to the east so that they would not interfere with the inheritance of Isaac of his estate, right? He took care of them, unlike with Hagar, where the angel of God took care of Hagar. But it's all good. So anyway, at the age of 175, Abraham breathed his last breath at a ripe old age. And guess what? I think it's amazing that Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which he bought from the sons of Het to bury his wife Sarah. That's where he was buried too, next to his wife. I just want to make a point. I find it very beautiful that the 2 sons, Ishmael and Yitzhak, Isaac, they reunited to bury their father Abraham. So there was no bad animosities or anything like that. They came together, as brothers, and rightfully so. And I'm happy to see that, right? And that was Abraham was 175. So he was 100 when Isaac was born. And so Isaac was 75, and Ishmael was 13 years older. So Ishmael was 88. I mean, 88 is not 88 of today, where you're old man, excuse me. But because people were living to 175 years, so that was like still the midpoint of their lives. But still, at the age of 75 and 83, they came back together to bury their father together, and I thought that was beautiful. So anyway, they give the genealogy of Ishmael also, his 12 princes, which was promised to Hagar. And then Ishmael lived 137 years as well. So let's see. And so Isaac prayed to God on behalf of his wife because she was childless, barren. Why do you use barren again? Barren sounds like you can't get pregnant up until God intervenes. Remember, his mother Sarah was called barren also. Is there a DNA, a biological thing where the mother is barren and then the daughter is barren? I don't know, but she wasn't his daughter, but the daughter-in-law was barren. I don't know. Maybe it could be because of the son too, because you don't know if it's the man, not, the sperm isn't, strong enough. So, but it says the woman was barren. So, I take it at face value. But I just found it interesting that God intervened again with Rebecca. All right. And then, of course, when she did get pregnant, then she had twins. So he really intervened, Jacob and Esau. Jacob, his name changed to Israel, right? So, so that's two nations that were in her womb, and see Jacob, he catches by the heel. He supplants, and of course God changed his name to Israel, struggler and overcomer, right? That's why, like I said, sometimes because of what the woman went through at birth is how she names the child. Oh, it was a rainy day, so I'm gonna call the child Rain, or something like that. I'm being funny, but because Jacob was grabbing Esau by the heel, she called him Jacob, right? So Esau's name, that is having hair, hairy, so the name of Esau. And of course, we know the promises, the prophecies, the older will serve the younger, and so forth, the two nations in her womb, right? And we know the whole story. I'm not getting into Jacob and Esau and, the blessings and the cross hand from Isaac and so forth, and how one got the blessing of the other, and how one tricked the father to get the blessing, and all of that. But I'm not getting into that. But basically, Rebecca had twins. So, the selling of the birthright, how Esau sold that out, for lentil soup and so forth. So that's basically it. So again, chapter 26, verse 5, I'll cap it off with this text. It says, Abraham heeded what I said and did what I told him to do. He followed my commands, my mitzvahs, my regulations, which is decrees, and my teachings. My mitzvah, my regulations, and my teachings, which is my commands, my decrees, and my instructions in English. So Abraham wasn't just faithful, he was obedient, right? God said he was obedient, and that's why God fulfilled the promise made to him, right? If he didn't fulfill his promise of circumcision, the covenant, Brit Milah, God would not fulfill the promises. If he didn't be obedient to God, God will not fulfill the promises. So just because God promised him before, while he was uncircumcised, if you will, from Genesis chapter 12, he didn't get circumcised until 17. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a responsibility to further subsequently be obedient. So that's all I'm saying, is that the obedience is better than just having faith. All right. So when people build a whole faith alone doctrine and try to use Abraham to justify it, it's not true. How they're trying to twist the scripture in order to force that doctrine. It's an eisegesis they're doing. Not an exegesis, eisegesis. They're inserting their doctrine into the text, right? Rather than the text is the foundation to build your doctrine on. So anyway, that's it. That was his calling. That was his life. That was his ministry, if you will. That's why he's the patriarch. And so that's the lesson and the teaching of Abraham. Just to summarize it, from chapter 10, he didn't come from the descendants of Ham, didn't come through Shem. Abraham came through Shem. He was blessed. Chapter 11 was the birth of Abraham from, what's his name? Terach, his father. Chapter 12 was the blessings pronounced unto Abraham, went down into Egypt, and what happened with Pharaoh and Sarah, and saying it was his sister. Chapter 13 again, the promises reiterated. Abraham was building an altar to thank God for the promise. Chapter 14, the battle of the 4 kings versus the 5 kings. The 5 kings lost, the 4 kings won. And when they won, they captured Lot in Sodom. And Abraham rescued Lot and brought back all the booty and the bounty and everything. And Melchizedek went out to meet Abraham, and he tithed to Melchizedek. And the king Bera of Sodom said, "Give me back my men only, please." And Abraham said, "Nope, you have everything." And so then chapter 15, again, the concern was that Eliezer from Damascus, Abraham's servant, was going to inherit. And God said, "No, the servant is going to come from your loins, your seed." So chapter 16, that's when Abraham took Hagar and procreated with her, thinking that Sarah was barren. And then, of course, all the baby mama jealousy from Hagar that ended up to run away. And the angel met her and said, "Don't worry, I got you. Go back to your master. You're going to have your own descendants too. I'll take care of you." Chapter 17, God established the circumcision covenant with Abraham that he had to fulfill. The promises was made from 12 and reiterated in 15 when Abraham, thanked God for the promises and considered God's promises as righteousness. Abraham wasn't righteous. He hadn't done anything yet. But as a matter of fact, he wasn't even firm on the promises because he thought he had to listen to Sarah and procreate through Hagar. So going back to 17, the promises of the circumcision. 18, when God appeared to him, the 3 men appeared to him and said, "I'm going to destroy Sodom because of their wickedness." And then he was bothering with God about Sodom. Then in 19, when the angels went down to Sodom and the men wanted to have sex with the angels, and God destroyed Sodom, and Lot escaped with his 2 daughters who procreated with him. And chapter 20, he went over to Gerar, the king of Abimelech of Gerar. And again, he said Sarah was his sister, and more problems that Abimelech was going to have because he was taking Abraham's wife. So chapter 21, Isaac was born, and the friction between Isaac and Ishmael, and Ishmael and Hagar had to leave, but the angel met Hagar again and took care of her, as far as her provisions. So as a matter of fact, Hagar didn't know the name of God. Otherwise, she would have said, called the place Yahweh Yireh as well, but she said El Roi, the God that sees, so, but Abraham knew the name of God. So when he was sacrificing Isaac and God provided the ram, he called it Yahweh Yireh. And so 22 is the story of the sacrifice where he was sacrificing Isaac, and the angel of the Lord interceded and stopped him. And that's when the angel said, "Now I know that you fear God. Now I know that you passed the test, if you will. You are a man of obedience." And that was all about, this obedience, right? So again, in 23, Sarah died, was buried in her cave, 400 pieces of shekel. 24, Abraham was old. He went and got a wife for his son Isaac, Rebecca. and she went back with him, and Isaac married her. And then 25, even though they said Abraham was old, he married his third wife, Keturah, had 5 children with them, gave them all grants, whatever it was, land grants, inheritance, money, estate, gifts, it's called in English. And so he sent them all off so that his son wouldn't be interfered with the promise that was made to him. God blessed the 12 tribes of Ishmael also, that Ishmael and Yisrael, Isaac, both buried Abraham in chapter 25 when Abraham died. All right, that's it. So basically, chapters 12 to 25 is the life and the calling of Abraham. All right, now in parting, don't forget, please subscribe to my channel if you like this content. I'll be coming out next week with the story of Job. I'll have my Hebrew Israelite brother, Yiftach Ben Dan. We're going to be doing from congregation Shomrei Habarit, Keepers of the Covenant. And we're going to be having a discussion next week, Friday, 8 p.m., about Eob, Job, and Hasatan, and why God allowed Hasatan to afflict Job, and why, who is Hasatan in the first place? Because there's the Hebraic, the children of Israel see Hasatan as one type of person, a servant of God, if you will, and Christianity sees Satan, they call him, as the devil, Lucifer, the enemy of God, the opponent of God. And so there's 2 different theories on Satan. So that's going to be next week. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, so when it's posted, you'll be notified. I think that'll be pretty interesting also. If you like this one on Abraham, you'll like that one on Job, okay? That's my thoughts, opinions, all right? So don't forget, I'll put on the link on the right-hand side so that you can just click the link and subscribe, all right? Thank you for taking the time and the patience to listen to this presentation. And anything that you want to share, anything you disagree with, I welcome your feedback, all right? God bless. Take care.